Gabe really wasn't joking about Ursula's decorating skills. When we walked into Charlie's, it resembled an elementary school classroom decorated for a Valentine's Day party. Sparkly red, pink, and white hearts were randomly placed around the walls. Swirly red streamers hung from the ceiling, and every robot worker wore some sort of Valentine's-themed accessory. As the one posted at the front doors greeted us, I delicately removed its heart-shaped sunglasses and placed them on myself. Then, I slid the straps of its flimsy angel wings off its arms, and placed them on Lacey. "Figured you might need these, because you're my angel," I said. "That was super cheesy, but thank you," she said with a smile. "I like your shades." Screams suddenly erupted from the back of the store. I looked at my wristwatch. Gabe had told us that he would create a distraction at 10:30 a.m. I watched the number swap to 10:31 a.m., which meant he was right on time. He hadn't told us what the distraction would be, just that it would be big enough for our entrance to go unnoticed, at least for a few minutes. Based on the shrieks still emanating from that direction, I'd say he was right. Regardless, Lacey's eyes scanned every direction. "Do you see them?" I looked around as well before I shook my head. "No." When we realized the coast was clear, we enacted step 1 of our plan: get the customers out. Lacey stepped up to the intercom microphone. I got flashbacks from all the times I watched her make the daily announcements. How I wish this were just another one of those. She cleared her throat before speaking, more out of anxiety than necessity. "Attention, shoppers of Charlie's. We kindly ask that you make your way to the exit." Suddenly, Gary scampered through the front doors and over to the podium. He gently shoved Lacey out of the way while shaking his head. "Nice won't work," he grumbled. "Gary, try." He cleared his throat, dodging Lacey as she attempted to take the mic back. "Gary," I began, "you're supposed to be outside." "Get the hell out! Run for your lives!" Chaos immediately increased tenfold. Instead of only the back of the store, screams now erupted throughout the building. Gary gave this reaction an enthusiastic grin before quickly exiting. As a horde of wide-eyed customers also rushed for the doors, a panicked Ursula narrowly missed being trampled by them. She let out an enraged shriek as her eyes landed on us. Lacey motioned for Gary to lock the doors, and he did so. Ursula smirked. "Oh, are the two of you going to take down little old me?" Ursula said in a mocking tone. She opened her mouth to speak again, but a loud popping noise in front of the sliding glass doors interrupted her. A thick plume of white smoke came with it, and with that came the wizard and his goose. "And us," said the cloaked magic man. Ursula's smile wavered, and the wizard's expanded. "But wait," he said, through crescent-mooned eyes. "There's more." Danielle and the rest of the Witch's Brew staff phased in to our left. A fiery-eyed Fifi was perched on Danielle's shoulder, ready to pounce. "Us too," she said with a hiss. Cheryl and Chip rushed from the back of the store, and Fifi hopped off of Danielle's shoulder to greet them. "Us 3, Cheryl said. Chip gave me a thumbs up with his human hand, his other hand transforming from a welding torch to his laser gun. Step 2, aka secure all doors, complete. Maura and Gabe hadn't shown up yet, but I didn't have time to worry why. As soon as Gary had finished speaking, Ursula smirked and said, "Well, why don't we let the fun begin?" She picked up the drink cooler behind her like it was nothing, before flinging it toward us. We scattered like rats, taking cover behind whatever surface was available. Lacey and I hunkered down behind the intercom counter, and I watched her as she tied her blonde waves into a low ponytail. I shook my head. "Those coolers were practically brand new," I said. "Why didn't you tell me succubi have super strength?" She shrugged. "I didn't know. I think the tome I was reading from is outdated." Come out, wherever you are," trilled Ursula in a god-awful sing-song voice. "Where's all that toughness from before?" Lacey rolled her eyes and launched a fireball over the counter with one hand. Ursula cursed as it hit its mark. All of her smugness burned away. At a nearby register station, Chip was powering up his laser as Cheryl typed something into his ab screen. Fifi covered them, peeking her tiny head over the station to fire several fireballs of her own at the dictator. She easily dodged them while picking up more projectiles. She ripped our bolted-down bench from the ground, while struggling to avoid at least 10 different fireballs, thrown at her by Fifi and the baristas. A couple had landed, and I could see the ends of her hair sizzling. "You fools," she snapped. "Don't you know I'm used to a little fire?" With a groan, she launched the bench at Cheryl, Chip, and their fur child. Lacey quickly stood up, despite me tugging at her cardigan and nagging my disagreements. "Want to bet?" she said, while her hands twirled around one another. A huge fireball formed within them, its light so radiant and heat so extreme that I had to lean away until she threw it. Ursula's eyes widened as it headed toward her at rapid speed. She jumped out of the way just before it hit her. "Do something, you imbeciles!" Ursula commanded the nearby robots. I watched the greeter robot take a step toward her before pausing. Its head slumped downwards and its red eyes dimmed. "What the hell?" she cried. The robot's head lifted once more, its eyes now white. "Must attack," it announced, before marching toward her. Step 3 completed. Every robot in the building moved toward her in unison. I smiled at them as I finally stood up. She flung several away from her, but they quickly returned, relentlessly pursuing her. "What on earth are you doing?" she barked. The robots began to dogpile her. Her super strength was not enough to fend off that many. As she was slowly being crushed, Lacey moved toward her. "I don't know how you haven't heard this," she said, "but you're actually in hell." "How's it going out there, Gare?" I said into my cell phone.
"Gary stand guard at door,"
he said.
"Many customers leave, but many are mad at Gary."
"Well, do your best to hold them off. I'm not sure what state the place will be in once we wrap this up. They may have to shop somewhere else." Gary didn't give me a response. The call ended with several growls and barks from whatever Gary was too occupied with to respond. I turned back to Lacey. "So, what are we going to do?" She shrugged. "I don't know. I have been trying to negotiate, but she stopped talking 20 minutes ago." "Did she pass out?" Lacey looked at me, her expression blank. "Jared, she doesn't need oxygen." "Oh, right," I said with a nod. "Boo." "Jesus!" I exclaimed, jumping a foot to the right. Gabe stood to my left, grinning from ear to ear. "That never gets old," he said. Mora was beside him, giggling. "Nice of you guys to finally join us," I said. "Where have you been?" The two spirits looked at each other. "Been practicing," said Gabe. "Practicing what?" "What Lacey taught us," said Mora. "Energy transference. We've only been practicing on each other so far, but I think we understand it well enough now to absorb Ursula's energy." Lacey's eyes lit up. "Really?" Mora nodded. Lacey motioned for them to give it a shot, and the two of them walked toward the robopile hand in hand, which I was definitely nosy enough to ask them about later. Both of them held their free hands up, aiming them toward the pile. As the energy was siphoned from Ursula's body, we heard her gasp. The first sound she had made in several minutes. Gabe glanced toward us, a smile beaming on his face. Mora stayed concentrated. Her usually ghostly white hands were even paler, due to her vicious grip on Gabe's hand. Within the mere seconds it took him to turn back toward her, the robots had been blasted upward. Ursula jumped to her feet as the robots rained down on us, smashing into bits and pieces upon landing. They were reduced to nothing more than giant paperweights. Ursula let out an ungodly screech, her arms spread wide. I wrapped Lacey in my arms as the windows around us exploded. With the panes no longer there to block, bodies began to flood inward rapidly. All of the customers that had been waiting outside were being sucked through the windows. Gabe and Mora collapsed simultaneously, and Lacey immediately sprinted toward them. "Lace, wait!" I yelled before running after her. As I drew closer to them, my brow furrowed in confusion. Gabe and Mora were usually slightly see-through. but not enough to discern any shapes from what was behind them. Now, however, they were so transparent that I could see the outlines of the tiles beneath them. And somehow, they were unconscious. "What's happening to them?" I asked her. She shook her head. "I think she's stealing energy from them, but I don't understand how." The cacophony of screams came from behind us, making me jump. We turned to see what was happening, and Lacey let out a sharp gasp at the sight. The customers were contorting and stretching into a writhing mass. Hands desperately clung to each other. Legs and arms a knotted mess of torn ligaments and shattered bones. Claws clung to tails, tails to antennae, and antennae to horns. They screamed in synchronized pain and agony. The involuntary conjoining only ended once the monstrosity was tall enough to touch the ceiling. It gave us a ferocious roar as it towered over us. "Oh, fudge," said Cheryl quietly. "How the hell is she doing this?" I said. "There's got to be another power source," she said, and then her head snapped to face me, her wide eyes locking with mine. "Where's Daisy?" she asked. My brow furrowed. "Why?" "We have to find her, Jared," she said. "Okay, but why?" I tried again. "We can't leave them to fight this thing alone." A ruckus of clatters and clacks came from our left. A pack of mannequins was rapidly approaching. Marlique was leading them. Their plastic appendages were protected by makeshift armor, made from duct tape and dismantled freight boxes. "We got you covered," said Marlique, holding up a bow and arrow fashioned from plastic clothing hangers and fabric scraps. "You two go find the demon spawn." Lacey thanked them, and then we were sprinting again. Jesus H. Christ. I do not recommend having your life force sucked out of you. Or is it death force? I don't know. I'm not a mechanic. I don't understand any of this paranormal stuff. If you can't tell, this is Gabe. Hiya. Great news. I'm not dead. Well, not double dead. But I wish that I was when I saw Cheryl's face staring down at me, just as my eyes popped open. Her blank expression is kind of terrifying, and if I could breathe, she would have absorbed every bit of carbon dioxide my body released. No offense to her because she's sweet and all, but that is not a sight I wanted to see while on the brink of death. Double death. Okay, that's enough death jokes. "Hi," said Mora, who was sitting beside her. Her emerald green eyes twinkled as she smiled at me. Now that's a sight I wanted to see. Can you really blame me, though? "Hi," I said in return. "What happened to us?" She shrugged. "I don't know, but I feel like I got run over by a freight train." As my lips parted to respond, a loud screech came from behind us. "What the fuck?" I yelled, quickly hovering to my feet. A large amount of flesh was stumbling around our checkout lanes, demolishing everything in its sight. Ursula stood behind it, cackling wildly like a hyena. Danielle launched a fireball at her face, putting her cackles to a stop. In retaliation, Ursula used her flesh puppet to throw a motorized shopping cart at the coven. It took 3 of them to pause the attack mid-air. Rage filled me at their panicked expressions. As they struggled to lower it, I ran forward, ready to strangle Ursula with my bare hands. I got 5 paces away before dropping to my knees, my incorporeal body too weak to continue. "Gabe!" cried Mora. "I'm fine," I said as I slowly stood up. "Yeah, there's a monster attacking us," said Cheryl nonchalantly. "Can you guys hold weapons yet?" "We can try," said Mora. As she twirled to face Cheryl, I noticed that her curls were disheveled. Parts of her bullet wound were peeking out. I tugged at my long sleeves nervously before recovering it for her. She looked at me expectantly. "You had something in your hair," I said. She gave me a small smile before taking a weapon from Cheryl. "Maybe we should get something that requires distance, since we're not feeling so great." She picked up a bow and a set of arrows before handing it to me. Like this. "Where'd you guys get all these?" I asked as I grabbed the weapon from her. "It's from Gary's stash," explained Cheryl. She rifled through the duffel bag, and I saw an insane amount of weaponry. Blades, brass knuckles, nunchucks. I think I even saw a bazooka. Considering the amount of ammo, arrows, and attachments I saw sitting below the weapons, I wondered if Lacey or the wizard had magically enhanced the bag to be endless. I wonder if they could upgrade the storage of a PS5 to be endless. Oh, I miss gaming. To go with my bow and arrows, I teleported to the outdoors section to grab a bottle of lighter fluid and matches. The behemoth we were up against was not a fan of this. I had shot several flaming arrows into its multitude of eyes. The spiraling sack of flesh gave me an unearthly screech before yanking the arrows free. It flung them back at me like a toddler throwing a tantrum. We spent the next several minutes essentially just aggravating the beast. Its entwined rolls of flesh sweated profusely, stunk up the area, making my eyes burn worse than my dirty gym socks from high school had. A low stream of obscenities left my mouth when several droplets fell onto me. "I need a fucking hazmat suit," I yelled, as I popped another one of my arrows into its 50-second eyeball. The beast let out a deep bellow that shook the building. It also made me miss my next shot. This would be easier if you were made of mold. Its upper body jerked, which pointed its gaping maw at the ceiling. Blood and guts projectile vomited outward. As it bounced against the ceiling tiles, the gore rained down upon us. It intermingled with the waterfall of sweat, making a truly revolting combo. I began to gag so aggressively at the smell that I thought I would throw up as well. Then I remembered I could no longer eat. This specific circumstance was the only time I would ever be grateful for that fact. "I think it's getting weaker," Mora said to me. She was wobbling slightly. I placed a hand on her shoulder to steady her. "Perfect timing," I responded, "because I don't think you could fight for much longer." And then the monster vomited once more. This time, instead of puking up various nasty liquids, it puked up body parts. As those dismembered limbs landed on the floor with a sickening plop, they began to squirm toward each other. Inch by inch, they drew closer until they too conjoined into several botched butcheries. Faces dotted their mottled skin, with twice as many hands jutting out. As they dawdled toward us, they reminded me of babies that were so chunky their fat rolls were practically stacked on top of one another. Now take that, but make it 10 times grosser. They looked terrifying, but still, I could fight a baby. "Motherfucker," I snapped. Quickly yet gently, I moved Mora to a still intact register station and placed her under it. "Hide under here and rest," I said. I stood and swiveled around, bow at the ready. My eyes locked on the one that was roughly 3 feet away. It stumbled during its approach. Its face is letting out a breathy whine as it righted itself. "I'd ask if you need a hand, but looks like you already have a bunch," I said. And then the faces spit a thick and gooey pus sludge at me. It went right through me, but its smell was an attack within itself. "Oh, you fucking bitch." After searching the entire store, Lacey and I moved to the employee-only hallway. We quickly searched every room. The bathroom was empty, and so was the break room. I nearly collided with her body after she paused in the doorway to the office. "Jesus, Lace," I said as I steadied myself. "What's wrong?" And then I saw what she was looking at. Affixed to the wall was an amalgamation of various humans, creatures, and disfigured blobs of flesh, much like the creature terrorizing our friends. Trapped beneath the mess was a frail and withered Daisy. Even though she was now in her proper succubus form, I could still recognize her by her facial features. Her skin was now gray, but her jawline remained sharp, even more so now with how thin she looked. Her cheeks were gaunt, and her eyes were sunken into her head. Despite her obvious lack of strength, she still had enough to give us a smirk. "Jared," she croaked, "you came back." "Not for you," I said quietly. My hand instinctively reached for Lacey's. Daisy let out a short, hoarse laugh. "At least, not in the way I wanted you to." She looked down at our hands and then up at my heart pendant. The smirk fell from her face. "It's always gonna be her, isn't it?" Her voice sounded genuinely sad. "It always has been," I said in a steady voice. Her facial expression morphed into one of anger. "Do it," she snarled. "Do what?" "Do what you came to do and kill me." She broke out into sobs, and the mass of flesh engulfing her began to sob as well, its miserable cries flowing out of whatever mouths it still had left. I looked at Lacey. As much as I wish we could, we can't let her suffer, she said. She's the energy source keeping Ursula alive. We both turned back to Daisy. She looked pitiful and small, a drastic change from what she had once been. The idea of me having a hand in someone's death made me feel uncomfortable, but the way she had manipulated me and my loved ones for months made me feel 10 times worse. Not only had she tried to destroy everything we had built at Charlie's, but she had also tried to ruin my relationship with Lacey. What she and her mother had put us through was inexcusable, and I couldn't let it be done to anyone else. Even though it made me uncomfortable, killing her would honestly be the kindest thing we could do. She didn't look like she had much time left anyway. I'll do it, I said. Lacey gave me a sad smile. She held a hand up, and my upgraded mop materialized within her grasp. She handed it to me, kissed me on the cheek, and stepped out of the room. Do you feel any guilt at all? I asked Daisy. It's in our nature, she croaked out. I nodded. Was that your mom's excuse for doing it to you? A tear escaped her right eye and traveled down her cheek before her eyes snapped shut. Just get it over with. I sighed before plunging the mop where I thought her chest would be. She let out a pained cry, and blood quickly began to flow from the wound and her mouth. She choked on it, and the flesh suffocating her began to convulse with each debilitating cough. I jumped back before blood could splatter on me. We could have been something, she struggled to say through gurgles. I'm not into toxic relationships. Sadness filled her eyes. As I ripped the mop out of her, the light left them. The mound of flesh around her began to disintegrate, and so did she. I exited the room as they crumbled into a pile of dust on the floor. Lacey was waiting for me in the hall, and we exited it hand in hand. When we entered the front of the building again, our friends began to cheer. My cheeks reddened as I smiled at them. Dust covered practically every square inch of surface. That's with me taking into consideration the way our friends looked, which was like they just clocked out from their shift at a coal mine. The only thing that remained of Ursula's existence was her god-awful Valentine's decor. I plucked a fake bouquet of roses from a nearby stand and gave them to Lacey. "Milady," I said. She smirked. Such a gentleman. Then she saw Maura and Gabe up and walking around, and she ran to them. Her excitement only grew when she realized she could hug Maura. They immediately began catching up, chatting about everything under the sun. Congrats on your first war, I told Gabe. Thank you, he said. I don't know how you guys survived the first one without me. The place barely stands without you, buddy. I think that could be said about everyone on your team, said Marlique as she entered the conversation. Jared, Lacey, Gabe, Cheryl, Gary, and Chip. I could include everyone in this room. But like I said, the 6 of you really are the dream team. Charlie's wouldn't be the same without you. The redness in my cheeks returned. Thanks, Marlique, I responded. Thank you, boys, she said. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a party to attend. She began to clickety-clack back to the group of mannequins. Don't do anything weird in the store. No promises, she yelled back at me. I'm famished, Lacey said to me. Why don't we take everyone to Papa Pete's to celebrate? A smile spread across my face at the mention of Papa Pete's Pizzeria, the spot of our first date. I couldn't help but kiss her. We can go celebrate, I said, after breaking away from our kiss. But first, I have to pee. She rolled her eyes. You have the bladder of a squirrel when under duress. You're not wrong, I agreed. Don't leave without me. I kissed Lacey on her temple before skedaddling off to the bloody bathroom. It was absolutely spotless when I entered. No blood, no funky carvings, and no messages on the mirror. It didn't even smell like copper, a lingering scent we always struggle to remove. I ignored the burning sensation in my bladder, lightly bouncing back and forth on my feet as I looked through the stalls. There was nothing at all. I sighed. Is my peeing a transactional process? I asked the room. It didn't respond, so I scurried into the first stall and did my business. My bladder was very grateful. As I left the stall and closed the door, I felt a tugging at my pants as I tried to walk away. Somehow, one of the belt loops on my pants had wrapped around a random nail jutting from the stall's wooden frame. I instinctively looked up, and that's when I saw the words suddenly carved into the door. A sticky note was lightly stuck to the carvings, obscuring them from my view. "The store can never be bought, pee-pee head," read the note. I removed it, gently folding it to place it in my pocket. The carvings below it said, "Congrats, Jared. You finished round 2. I rolled my eyes. They were definitely fucking with me. I heard footsteps approaching, so I looked to my left. Cheryl had entered, but stopped just inside the doorway. "Is the bathroom out of order again?" she asked. I shook my head while I reached into my pocket to pull out a permanent marker. "No, it's working just fine," I responded, as I drew a smiley face under the carved words. Alright everybody, that's it for the final part of Charlie's Department Store. This series was written by the very talented Ashley Watson, who's now released this in book form. I'll be including a link in the description below to the book on Amazon. I hope you all will check out the book and support the author. I know these series take a long time to put together, so I really do appreciate her letting me read it on the channel. Alright, thanks a lot everybody. Hope you have a great night. Become a channel member today for early access, bonus videos, and special emojis only available to members. Check out the description below or click the join button for more info. If you'd like another way to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon page at patreon.com/JordanGroupHorror. As a patron, you'll get access to bonus videos and content. You'll be credited at the end of every video going forward, and if you decide to stay for 3 months, I'll name a character after you which will be featured in a Hollow's End story. Links to join the Patreon are in the description. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help the channel continue to grow. And see you again next time at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you have a great night.